Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined by my hero John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
Now today we've got something quite interesting for people because we have worked hard over the last 6-7 months to bring people up to speed as to what we're wanting to talk about today, and that is flow. How to flow, and today we're going to have the introduction to flow, because when people flow, we tend to get through life, and I tend to look at it like being a jellyfish. You know, they float around obstacles, they float through them, they float under them, over them, whatever way they go, but they don't get involved in the drama. Now, today, you're going to start us off with an introduction, and we're going to go forward and explain to people how they can flow and not what flow is.
Right. So what happens is that flow is very well studied. It's very well known. And I work for a company, Flowcess, your unique process for flow. We help people learn how to flow uniquely for them. Somebody else's process won't work for you. Everybody's process is unique. And we believe we're the only company in the world that can help people intentionally do this. Now, there are a lot of people out there talking about flow and their process for getting to flow. Like there's somebody out there right now who I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, their process for getting people to flow was do something really dangerous that you could get seriously injured or die doing, then you'll flow. And eventually we'll see why that could work. But if you look at it, this person's saying to do it from experience. In fact, when they give a talk about helping people flow, they'll say people died for this information. All experiential. We've talked about how psychology and medicine go effect to cause. And I showed you how we go cause to effect. In fact, there's a very famous book written 30 years ago, national bestseller on flow. And this book basically looked at the effects of flow. So what's really interesting about this book is two things. One is that it did everything effect to cause. It asked tens of thousands of people from all over the world their experience, and it documented those effects of flow. And most of the book is very philosophical about life and consciousness, all the stuff you and I like to talk about, Colin.
Yeah.
So when it comes to flow, you can't help but get philosophical and talk about the intangible or the spiritual. You just can't help it. And half of this book does that. The other part that's interesting about this book is they cannot tell you how to intentionally flow. Why? Well, let me read a little passage from it. It says here on page 201 of my book, what we need is not only names and descriptions, but an understanding of how the process works. Unfortunately, our ignorance in this matter is still very great. And they're talking about the process inside your brain.
Yes.
So in this very book, they admit they don't know how the brain works well enough to be able to explain it to you how to do it intentionally. You would think that these people would be interested in that, but I've reached out to them. I've reached out to many people who want to be flow experts and said, we have this model for the mind and the brain, which is the thing everybody's lacking to do this intentionally. Would you be interested in it? We never hear a word. And that's the issue, is people think telling you the effects, describing the effects is helping you. Hey, flow is really great. You should really want to do it. I just helped you, right? Pay me money. Colin and I believe actually helping people do it is when the real help happens. So I could go to sleep every night feeling good that I am helping people actually flow. And what I want to do in this first episode, this overview, is explain to you why. There's 3 reasons why I believe Flowcess is the only company in the world that can intentionally help you to flow.
Absolutely. Now, when we're talking about flow and we're talking about the effects that people show you, it's almost like showing them their behaviors and say, don't do this behavior, right? People are not going to do what you tell them, because if you're doing it like that book, if you're doing it on a mass scale, you're telling everybody the one way, which doesn't allow them to, it might resonate with some, great, yep, I'll totally get that. Because of the way it's been written, it might resonate with one or two of the intangible drivers. Now, you're not going to get all seven. You're not going to get all seven. And this is where the other five might struggle, where the two excel. And this is what the likes of Tony Robbins, you know, he does this on a stage on a mass scale. So out of 50,000 people in a stadium, he might get 5,000 people that will really benefit and get into this kind of sense of flow and work as to the way that he speaks. But the other 45,000, they'll get a buzz on the day, but then long term, they're going to go back downhill again.
Right. And this book doesn't even propose to try to tell you how to flow. It just describes the experience, it describes the benefit, and then it philosophizes to all these spiritual aspects and stuff, which is really cool. I love that. But it doesn't help you flow. And to your point, books that have been written in the last 30 years trying to help you flow are doing exactly what you said. The other books are doing what you said. They're trying to say, hey, this helped me flow. Maybe it'll help you. And I'm going to show you why. So there's three reasons why I believe we're it. The first reason is that flow involves what we call the 10 thought process. Psychology has a name for 3 of the 4 thought processes, and we've covered this. You know, psychology has a name for the destructive thought process. They call it dysfunctional or dysregulation. It has a name for the 160 or the drift thought process. They call it regulation. It has a name for the focus, or we call it 80, the self-regulation. There is no name for this 10. And the way I illustrate this is and I've said this before, but I'm going to do this again because it's a little different. There was a study done, very famous study, with 4 decks of cards. 2 decks had a red back, 2 decks had a blue back. People could pick any of the decks, flip a card, and they won or lost the money on the card. Now, what they didn't know was the red decks had big winners, big losers, and more losers than winners. The red deck was dangerous. The blue deck had little winners, little losers, and more winners than losers. It was safe. After 10 flips, everybody's unconscious brain knew the red decks were dangerous. After 40 flips, their behavior changed. They started picking the blue decks more. They still picked the red decks, but not as much. After 80 flips, everyone consciously said the red decks are dangerous. So what I say to people is, 80 flips or the 80 thought process is where we're conscious. Do you want to live life at 80 flips or 10 flips?
10 every day. That's flow.
Right. And I'll say, what's your plan to do it? Professional gamblers, not addicted gamblers, professional gamblers did the same test. And in 10 flips, they said the red decks are dangerous. And I'll say to people, how do you think they got there? I talked to our state's Department of Public Education, told that story. And I said, do you think that those professional gamblers got there by trying harder, thinking more, efforting more at 80, basically? Yeah, they said. And I'm like, no, that is not how you get there. You don't get the flow by controlling more and trying harder. You got to give up control, and you got to use your body, your 10 thought process, to signal to you. Those professional gamblers know when they reach for the red deck, their hand shakes. They reach, doesn't shake, shakes. I know my body uniquely. When my hand shakes or when my eyebrow twitches, I know that that's dangerous. That's what flow is. And we don't have a name for that thought process. We call it the 10 thought process. So my first proof is that flow involves this 10 thought process that psychology doesn't even have a name for. And the book Blink covers that 10 thought process, except for the second last chapter when it covers flow, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But even that author of the book Blink doesn't understand that all of his chapters except one were the 10 thought process, and one of his chapters was flow, and that's why he got confused.
Yeah. So when you were talking about this feeling of the shaking and the safe, the shaking and the safe, I like to talk about intuition. Okay, it's almost like that intangible knowing, the feeling, and it's an early warning system that's built into every human being. and we're all capable of using it. You know, just because you and I know doesn't mean that nobody else can know. Everybody can do this. And when we talk about, people being gifted or people, kind of doing things, like we understand what I do with my clients, and I use the medium between myself and my client as my cards. Now, my cards tell me a lot because my intuition, my flow, my giving up control allows me to read these cards and the energy from the person together. I create a story, it resonates with them. I can then help them out of the hole and move forward from where they are. It's the exact same thing. It doesn't mean that I was born extremely gifted. It just means that I'm in tune with myself enough that I am then able to give up control, not bother what anyone thinks, and really just trust myself completely. And again, it goes down to self-esteem. That's everything goes back to self-esteem. Once we're running on that high level of self-esteem, we trust ourselves. And it means we're not looking outside for validation for any of these things. And this is where I feel that this has all just come to me very, very quickly in the last year. And it's maybe because I was working with you and allowing you to teach me. I'm saying it aloud, right? But you understand, it's like I asked you, teach me what you know, teach me how to flow. And I went from being somebody that tried to control life, tried to control clients, and I don't mean control them as a person, but how they came to me, I tried to control. I tried to do all these things, and then that was it. I learned.
Right. So that leads into my second point. Flow in and of itself is not a thought process. It is the toggling or the flowing between 80 and 10. So the point you made is intuition. Some people could call intuition 10. The issue is that why doesn't intuition work for everybody? Because they at 80 take control. So they might get a feeling, and then knowing how to get that feeling out is the key. Instead, what they do is they go, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, I think it's this. And now they start thinking, and we say at 80 or logic, and they wipe out the 10.
Yeah.
What flow is flow isn't the 10 thought process. It's not 80, it's not 160, it's not 320. It is toggling or flowing back and forth between 80 and 10. So what you do is you have to be focused, resilient, in control at 80. And then you're focused on one thing. And when that thing happens, you're giving up control and seeing how that made you feel. And you're letting your unconscious talk to you through feelings. And then, or if you're performing, we'll see later, in later episodes about doing sports, you're looking for one thing and then you're letting go and letting your body take over and do the thing that you've trained it to do. So you're control, out of control, control, out of control. That's what flow is you're going back and forth between the conscious and unconscious. You're flowing back and forth. So it's not a thought process. So when people talk about the thought process of flow, I just laugh. Because I go, I know, but it's hard. If you think about it, if you don't have a name for the 10 thought process, then how are you going to know that you're flowing between the 80 and the 10 thought process? You won't know that. So that's the issue. Now, what's kind of interesting is there's a very famous person in my area, world famous, who deals with savants. He was like a resource on the Tom Cruise movie with Dustin Hoffman, Rain Man. He was a resource on Rain Man. And we went and talked with him. And he asked me, he said, how come all these savants are male? And how come like 90% of them get an injury on the left side of their head? Now, this is a world savant expert. And he's asking me. A savant is someone who is living in the 10 thought process. That's what a savant does. And so what happens is we talked about your big picture and small picture. The left side of your brain is where your small picture. When you get an injury there, you lose control to focus on things. Now, a woman has the ability to have 5 thoughts. So when she has a serious brain injury, if it doesn't kill her, she still has access to 4 thoughts.
Yeah.
A man has 1 thought. When he has a serious injury on the left side of his head, that doesn't kill him. Again, these are traumatic injuries. What happens is he now loses the ability to control this 1 thought, and his unconscious starts running his thoughts. And that's what's happening with Rain Man, and that's what's happening. The reason why, it all goes back to this model of the mind and brain. Here's the world's savant expert who can't explain why all the savants are male because he doesn't have a model for the mind and the brain. These people can't help you flow, and they admit it because we don't have a model for the mind and the brain. You'd think this would be important. So that's the issue, is that savants fit. So if you think what flow is like taking, I like to say, it's like taking a vacation to Savantville.
Yeah.
When you flow, you momentarily become a savant, and then you're back. And then you momentarily become a savant and you're back. And that's how you're able to have this. In later episodes, we're going to see how understanding this model allows us to communicate and talk and interact and get behavioral change out of people that we think have mental, deformities, because they're in their unconscious brain always works. And that's 90% of your brain. So my second point is that flow is not a thought process. It's the toggling between two thought processes.
Absolutely. Now, you're talking about mental deformities. When we go through a traumatic time in our life, so we become mentally unwell, or these are brain damage also, because we habituate to certain parts of our thought. So I can never look at something like that again because I feel hurt. That's brain damage. The way that we actively avoid something and not go through it and allow ourselves to flow is brain damage. So when you were talking about the left-hand side of the brain and this kind of getting damaged, that can be either physical and it can be mental as well. And again, it doesn't matter if it's male or female brain, it can cause brain damage. Women are luckier because they've still got four thoughts after it. And when I try and speak to males especially and explain to them, you've got one thought, women have five. Women are not taught about their brain from a young age. So everyone thinks they're overthinkers and wild, where if them in flow are much more powerful than a man's brain, they've got a lot more, they're able to focus on more things. It's just that they don't understand how to contain it or make it flow in an aspect. And where men, I put it down to them just before we go on to the next subject, I always speak to my clients about whether it's a male or a female. I say, if we're in a parking space, in a car park, and you're beside me, and there's yourself and myself, we need to reverse into that parking space, who's got more chance of crashing? Now, the women always say the women. And I'll say, do you know why that is? And she'll say, no. And I'll say, well, while I am unconscious, I've driven my car for years now, I understand. I put it into reverse, I look in that mirror, I go back. I said, you're looking in that mirror, that you see an eyebrow out of place, you see your hair out of place, you're worrying about the kids at school, what you've got happening for dinner. So you're not focusing, you're not flowing. So this is when I try and speak, and we'll go on to another time talking about meditation to help people flow and using that muscle in the brain to allow yourself to switch off so that flow takes over. And this is how I'm able to help my clients in terms of the way that I work.
Right. And we did a video on sexism where we talked about this. It's harder for women to flow than men because women have a better brain.
Yeah.
When we talk about women having a better brain, everybody gets all upset. And it's like, well, but the thing is it allows them to be more at 80. They can be 5 times a guy at 80, but a guy's more likely to flow. But if you get a woman in flow, she's unbeatable. She's undefeated. So that's the thing, is we did that in a sexism video to try to illustrate that. So the thing is that, we will cover how to help women flow, because it is a whole different process, and that's the key. And it'll get to sleep, and we'll talk about that eventually too. The third reason is one that's near and dear to your heart. So if you think about it, we said, when people tell me they know how to flow and they're experts, I listen to see if they understand the 10 thought process. Sometimes they do. I listen to see if they understand that flow is not a thought process in itself. It's a manipulation between two thought processes, because it leads to the third reason, is how, if flow is manipulating your brain between two thought processes, who's doing the manipulation? Your brain can't manipulate itself. The piano can't play itself. The piano can't plug itself in, if it's electric piano, and play itself. Somebody ahead of the brain has to be playing the brain. And this is where, when I read, books like this, and they get into all these philosophical things, he's missing it. but he knows unconsciously when he writes that, he knows that there's something intangible that's in this model, but he can't find it. But it's something you picked up on and have shared with the world, is intangible drivers. You are an intangible driver of this car. You are the intangible driver manipulating the brain, the physical brain. If you are physical, then you can't manipulate the brain because your brain is physical. Your brain is physical, your mind or soul is intangible, and you are an intangible driver. And that, when you understand the intangible driver you are, then you see how to manipulate your own unique brain between 10 and 80. So the biggest reason why everybody's missing this is they don't understand the mind or the uniqueness of the individual. And we've been trying to share this with the world. I've been trying to share this with the world for 15 years. You've been trying to share it for, a good year, on these videos. And psychology and everybody on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram just comes up with more excuses to embrace personality tests and block themselves from flow. And if that's what they want to do, I feel bad for them. But the key is always the uniqueness of the individual. That is step one.
Yeah. And what you're talking about there about excuses, every time that I work with somebody, they have a choice. Either stop making excuses and let go, or keep making excuses and make your life hard or even harder than what it is just now. And once they are told what their uniqueness is, and then they don't go with it and they don't make the changes, their life actually becomes harder than what it was before they came to see me, because their unconscious brain has already been triggered and it knows that they know, and they're choosing not to, and it's so difficult.
The unconscious knows everybody's unconscious knows their own uniqueness, and it's waiting for that moment. So you're absolutely right. When you let people know that, now the unconscious is on them all the time. So that's really our overview. There's 3 reasons why we're able to intentionally help people, and these 3 reasons are why no one else is able to intentionally do it. We understand that there's a 10 thought process, something psychology doesn't have a name for. We understand that flow is not a thought process. It's the toggling between, or flowing between 2 thought processes. And we understand that the mind, or the intangible driver of the individual, manipulates that toggling.
Yes. And how we can get there, people, if they keep watching, they will find out over the next couple of weeks, maybe a month or so, they are going to find out how to flow and how they can do it intentionally and how they can have a happier life. And our next video is going to be on happiness, which is also part of the flow process. If you're flowing, you're happy. And there's less chance of you being able to be sad because you're just living it. And it's great. So thank you, John. Looking forward to the next video, and I will speak to you very soon. Take care.
Bye.